Now, this Chelsea side are not playing well in the league recently. They have injuries like most. They changed their shape a bit against Brighton. They did not get the result. They did not deserve a result. And he was full of excuses, Tuchel, after the game that were a nonsense about being tired and stuff like that. And it's going to be interesting to see if Antonio Conte has learned anything from the dismantling in the first 2 games and how he's going to approach it. But I still fancy Chelsea for a win. But I think Tottenham should be a little bit more competitive than they were in the League Cup.
It's interesting, Frank, what Craig's talking about here, because if you do take away cup competition, as he said, in the Premier League, it has definitely not been Chelsea's best run of late.
That's for sure, Kay, and I couldn't agree more with Craig. You know, Chelsea has to react because what they showed lately is not enough. Tuchel was saying today in the press conference that he gave 2 days off to the players because he thought that they were a little bit sloppy on the last game against Brighton, and that's maybe the first time. But yeah, if we can consider that he had lots of injuries, COVID problems with some players from the squad. Overall, the way they played wasn't good enough. And for a club who thought lately that they could win the Premier League, if Arsenal and Tottenham can win all their games, Chelsea could be in the 5th or 6th position, which is absolutely not enough for a club with so many ambitions. So they have to react. They have to play better. The players have to do their best because it's not enough for sure, and especially offensively. It's like we came back to what we saw last season. And on top of it, the defense is not as good as they were last season. The middle as well is not that good. So they all have to react all together to make sure that they can save the position of being 3rd in the Premier League.
What do you think's wrong with them, Robbo? Chelsea?
I'll go back to what I said a little while ago, that Tuchel needs to get the best out the front line. You know, they dominate games at times. They pass it quite well. They're quite slow in their build-ups. They get it into wide areas. They create opportunities. But if you're going to play Lukaku up front, you've got to get to the ball to him much earlier. When I saw him play for Inter over the last 2 seasons, he was the kingpin for everything that they did. Everything went through him. They went from back to front quite quickly. In and around the box, they created little spaces so he could roll balls into him, and he got himself turned. He was touching the ball more than any other player. When I've seen him play for Chelsea, he's been a bit part player. He's been waiting for balls to come into the box, and I don't think that's the strength of Lukaku. So Thomas Tuchel, having bought him, or whether the club bought him, he's got to get the most out of him because he's an important player for them.
Well, Robbo, this is the first time we've seen him since we heard what Tuchel said, where he said he feels they give in Lukaku everything that they need, and it's not about serving one player. But as you mentioned, Robbo, at Inter, Conte knew that you had to serve that player. You had to almost build a team around him to get the best out of him. So should Tuchel be looking at that?
Well, he's got to get the ball into him a lot more. And when he was playing at Inter, he also had another strike partner, so they were linking up with each other. They also sucked the opposition in at times, Inter, so they could then play the ball into Lukaku. And Antonio Conte praised him and put an arm around him, and that's what Lukaku likes. He hasn't been at his best, but I don't think he's had the right service. I don't think he's been used in quite the right way. He's gone back to the Manchester United days where he's touching the ball every so often and not looking a great technical player. At Inter, he looked a far better technical player because he was having so many touches of the ball.
Chelsea need to speed up the play.
Kay,
sorry,
Craig.
Go on, Frank. Go on, Frank.
Sorry. Yeah, I think we have to see the whole picture when we judge Lukaku, and I think Tuchel should do that too. He lost Reece James on the right side and Chilwell on the left side, where now he has Azpilicueta and Alonso, who definitely cannot serve Lukaku as the 2 others used to do. And that's one of the key of the good start of Chelsea, when those 2 players on the flanks were providing crosses to Lukaku, and we all know that Lukaku is terrific in that matter and to finish actions. And he hasn't got those balls anymore, and that's a prejudice for his football. He cannot create chances on his own. He needs the others to serve him. It's why Conte used to build a team around him. And I don't think Tuchel is doing the same thing.
I think he's used, and the way I'm saying it a little bit, he's used the tiredness excuse that he used after the Brighton game, by the way, and we talked about this on the show with Stevie, was a lot of the guys had been left out of the team and you know, the recent weeks before that, and so we're actually quite fresh. And he actually left out his best midfielder from Man City and Mateo Kovacic, left him on the bench against Brighton. He was their best player at City. Not that that would have been difficult. But yet, I understand James is young and dynamic. Chilwell is a fast up and down fullback. I understand. But if Marcus Alonso, if that's who it is, and Azpilicueta can't get up and down the wing or can't get up and put a cross in, they shouldn't be playing. And on top of that, I think the tiredness things comes about rather than saying, well, did I do enough to change it? You know, play with these two narrow sort of players behind Lukaku, and when teams swamp that area, it's difficult to get the ball into them, and then it's difficult to feed Lukaku because everything's tight. Well, if you're not getting it from the fullbacks, then get some of those players like Hudson-Odoi or whoever to change the shape. Get them in a wider position. Do something to change the dynamic. Because as the boys were saying, Lukaku's only going to score goals, really, if you're getting X amount of good crosses into the box. He showed it against Brighton, I think it was, not Brighton, the game before at home, before he was dropped for all this debacle. The game against Aston Villa, when he came off the bench at Villa Park, it was a great cross, and he got across his defender, bang. Great goal, header. That's his bread and butter. So it's up to Thomas Tuchel to find a solution for certain players been missing.
I was going to say, Craig, that yes, you're talking about crosses, and Frank was talking about crosses as well. But at Inter, he scored a lot of his goals when balls were rolled into his feet and he was turning defenders or running just down the side of defenders and getting shots away. He was dynamic. He was good with his back to goal. It wasn't just about crosses. So if you're not getting crosses in, then you have to create space in the midfield areas so you can roll balls into him, so he can get himself turned. So he's not coming back towards the ball. He's holding the defender, getting himself turned, and the next one is a strike. That's how he scored most of his goals for Inter, and they're not really using him in that sort of way.
It's interesting. Sorry, I know you're going to go somewhere else here, but it's interesting because, you know, the worm has turned. I'll give you a Carabao Cup final, fine, for Thomas Tuchel. But really, do the Chelsea fans deep down really care about that? Or an ownership really care about that? Or are everybody now looking at Chelsea's league form, Chelsea's league position, as Frank mentioned, is, I wouldn't call it vulnerable yet, but it's not far off it. It's not far off it. And Tottenham have 4 games in hand. And if they were to win this game, and Arsenal continue, although they didn't play well yesterday in the League Cup, if they continue to get players back and show a bit of form again that we've seen, it might be a fight for that top 4. Yeah. And then we're now talking about his job, because this is the most ruthless ownership, certainly in England. And this worm has turned so fast, and we're going to find out if Thomas Tuchel can fix this downturn with coaching. And don't give me the tiredness, because all these teams, apart from Burley, all these teams have been playing, right? It's not about tiredness, it's about team selection, and it's about performance.
And Robbo's actually gone for a draw in this game. How much of that is down to Conte's Premier League record with this side, Robbo? Or is it because of that bounce that we might see because of the result against Leicester?
Well, so far, I've been a little bit disappointed with Antonio Conte. You know, I'm a big fan of his. I've saw his Juventus side, his Italy side, and then Inter side. And I don't think he's got his point of view across or his philosophy across to the players yet. But I just saw signs against Leicester that's the first time they've really dominated a game. They had 27 shots throughout the game. I think they had 67-something possession. They were at their very best at times in midfield. They were getting it into Harry Kane. Harry Kane was starting to, as Craig said, starting to come short and get players in. He was starting to then make runs in behind. He looked an all-round centre forward again. And they started to have a good understanding. And that's what I saw in that game against Leicester. And I just think Conte is now getting his views across to the players. And that's good news for Spurs.
Frank, Craig touched on the top 4 here, and obviously there's games in hand to be played for Spurs. So they're going to finish in a top 4 position?
Well, we talked about that the last show that I was in. You know, I think at first, and I think a month ago or 2 months ago, I said West Ham would have a better chance, but they lost so many top players in their team that I think I have to review that. And Tottenham seems to be the best team of all four that we see on screen. They're doing great under Conte. They're doing absolutely fantastically in the Premier League. So yeah, they deserve to be, for me, the one who can finish 4, or maybe more if Chelsea doesn't react quickly.
Craig, you're going for a Spurs loss in this game.
Yeah.
If they do lose this, what does it mean for their top 4 chances?
No, I think they're still reasonable, bearing in mind they've got a lot of games in hand. I think Chelsea should see a bounce with the players and the playing squad that they have. But I think 4th place is definitely up for grabs when you watch. I know they won in midweek, Man United, but if you'd watched the game in its entirety, it would not be convincing.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.